Welcome. This is episode 156 of Adventures in Pop, and you are very welcome indeed. And in fact, now that you're here, we can start. I was just waiting. Well, not for long. I mean, thank you. You're here. You're here now. Let's not make a thing of it. And you're looking well. Okay, today I'm going to focus on some new information from Spotify. If you are an indie musician, a bit like me, and you are uploading music to Spotify, do you ever wonder, well, how many of you there are, how much competition you're up against, and if you're getting some streams, if you're getting a bit of traction on a track or two, do you ever wonder, kind of in relative terms, how well you're doing? These are thoughts that cross my mind, partly because I'm a bit nerdy about numbers, but partly because, you just kind of want to know, I suppose, if you've been doing it a little while, and for me, I guess I'm in year 6 or 7, you just want to know that you're making progress, that you are moving forward. So the fact that Spotify have released a lot of information on their loud and clear section, if you are an artist and you've got Spotify for Artists, you can see a lot of this for yourself. Now, I'm borrowing a lot of this from a video that I've just watched with Andrew Southworth, so he's also worth watching and following, and is covering some of this information, and it is genuinely very interesting. So a bit numbery today, but if you are an independent artist and you're uploading music to Spotify, this might very well float your boat, fry your burger. Okay, so this is about 2023, and this is particularly relevant for indie artists. And basically, the size of the pot apparently last year was about $9 billion. $9 billion. That's the amount that Spotify paid out to their artists. And of that 9 billion, about half, about 4.5 billion, these are big numbers, aren't they? There's quite a lot of noughts on the end there. The 4.5 billion was paid out to independent artists. So artists that did not have major record company backing and distribution, etc. So that's really interesting. I'm sure it's a vastly greater number of people than the other half who've got their music industry backing the record company contracts. But about half of all the money paid out is going to, I guess, indie artists like you and me, or maybe more like you than me, because I don't seem to be getting that much of it. But, we'll come on to this. Okay, so what they also discovered, there are about, or we can discover because they're telling us, there are about 10 million artists who've uploaded something. So, maybe as little as one track or as many as, albums and albums. But 10 million artists are kind of currently involved in making up that full size of the pie. And of that 10 million, astonishingly, 5 million, half of that total number, have never generated as many as 100 lifetime streams. In total, they haven't got to 100 streams. So if you are an independent artist and you have put stuff up on Spotify and reached more than 100 streams, and that is quite a low bar, then you're already in the top half of all of the people who are kind of currently represented on Spotify. So 10 million altogether, 5 million never get to 100 streams. And actually, do remember, this is in the context now of these new rules that Spotify have generated, which basically says if you get fewer than 1,000 streams in a year, they're not going to pay you. So this whole 5 million artists are going to get zip all from Spotify. Now, I don't know, I'm not really here to comment on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But let's be honest, if they did get paid, they'd be paid a couple of pennies, 1 or 2 cents, and it's not going to be life-changing. It's not even going to buy them a cup of coffee. So it's not going to make much difference, is it really? Okay, 80% of people who've made $1 million, so $1 million or more, so 80%, we're down to a very small number here, but 80% of those that made $1 million or more never had a hit single. They never had one track that was a breakaway, runaway hit. And they count a hit as being in the top 50, I think, of any country. So didn't make it to any top 50s, and they've probably made it. They've made their $1 million probably on the back of having quite a lot of tracks that have all done quite well, but no one standout breakaway. That's quite an interesting lesson for all of us. You know, you don't have to be chasing the hit. You just need to be getting stuff up there that is of a certain quality, that is reaching a certain audience, and is ticking over. So that's an interesting one. Now, Spotify have said that they are focusing now on the kind of top 225,000 artists who they regard as emerging professional artists. Now, I don't know why the figure is 225,000, but that is the number that they talk about. And I guess it's worth trying to, see how difficult it is to get to that level of being in the top 225,000 artists. And that's very interesting. I'll talk about that in just a second. Now, half of those who made $10,000 back in 2017, they want to make a point, Spotify, that the revenue is kind of growing exponentially. It's accelerating year by year as more and more countries come online, as more and more people upload, as more and more people become subscribers to Spotify. But half of those who got to $10,000 back in 2017 are now making more than $50,000. So that seems, it seems like they've had to rather dig deep to get that particular statistic, but it's still, interesting nonetheless. And then they do have this thing, again, in the loud and clear section of Spotify for Artists. You have to kind of dig it out. But basically, you can key in the number of monthly listeners you've had. You can do this with total streams as well, but monthly listeners is really interesting. But if you put your monthly listeners in, it will tell you where you're ranked in terms of monthly listeners. So I did this, and I was watching, what Andrew Southworth did, and then I wanted to put my own number of monthly listeners in. So he put in 10,000 monthly listeners, and it shows you that with 10,000 monthly listeners, you are around the 286,000 level. Now, that is actually not that many monthly listeners, although I know it's difficult to generate, but it's not that many monthly listeners. Takes you already into the top, 2 or 3% of all of the artists on Spotify. If you get that up to 15,000, you're then in the top 231,000. And remember, we just said, Spotify is focusing on the top 225,000. Now, it just so happens at the moment, and bear with me and forgive me if this just sounds completely crass, but I happen to have at the moment 28,000 monthly listeners, and this is unusual. Let me be really honest, it doesn't happen very often, but at the moment I've got 28,000 monthly listeners. That puts me at about 162,000 inside that 225,000, and I have noticed, this is something quite odd, I think, for me, is I have noticed that I have been receiving I've been getting emails and people trying to get in touch with me, message me on Instagram and the like, to offer me places on their playlist and to work with me and come on board, etc. So that's really interesting. And I have noticed just in the last month that I've triggered something that is eliciting interest in a way that I probably have not had before. So that's quite exciting. And one more thing on this, and we'll talk a lot more about this as we go along. One of those calls was from a PR company in this country, in the UK, and there was a guy called Dan who was good enough to actually offer to talk to me in real life on a Zoom call so that we could see each other and actually have a conversation. Now, this is something I've asked for many, many times from other organisations or individuals where, we've been working together, where basically I've been paying for a service around promoting PR, etc. Never once has that offer been taken up. This time, here was a guy called Dan saying, love to get in touch with you, let's have a Zoom call. And I thought, absolutely, I will. And and it's kind of helpful that he's in the same country because it just gives us a bit more familiarity, a few more references in common. It just helps that relationship go from zero to something, a little bit faster. Now, look, I can't say to you yet where that's going and what's going to happen, but I will do, and I will share all this because this whole adventure is about going somewhere a little unpredictable and letting you know where I'm going. You can come with me and I can share it with you. And I've always been sharing the good and the bad and the ugly. There's been quite a lot of bad and a fair amount of ugly. So maybe there's also going to be a bit of rather interesting good round the corner. Who knows? It's still going to be something I've got to pay for. It's not free. Nothing comes for free, Money doesn't grow on trees, So it's, you've got to have a bit of kind of money in reserve to go the whole way here, I think, at the moment. But this is going to be very interesting, and I promised you I will keep you posted. And I'll be back very shortly with more crazy tracks, and we'll be limbering up towards the 10th release from my album Strange Alien. Oh, by the way, if you haven't heard the other 9, they're all out there on Spotify. The most recent being Spoil Your Vibe. You really do need to listen to them, otherwise, well, it's just distressing for me, all that work, and you don't even bother. But I know that you will. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey. I really appreciate it. Stick around, and bless you all. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll talk to you very soon.